Hello, and welcome to the Enhancing Clinical Practices and Outcome stream of the SNOMED CT Expo 2021. My name is Susie Roy, and I'm the Customer Relations Manager for the Americas and Collaboration Specialist at SNOMED International, and I'll be moderating this session. Please use the live Q&A in your AirTouch device to type out your questions to the presenter, and all of the questions will be answered at the conclusion of the presentation. So now I'm pleased to introduce Ms. Anna Paredes, who will be presenting Mapping an Allergy Reference Set to SNOMED CT Case Study. Ms. Paredes, Anna, please proceed.
Thank you. So yes, thank you, Susie. I'll be presenting a case study about mapping an allergy reference set to SNOMED CT. I will first start with a brief introduction. The Vidal Group seeks to incorporate SNOMED CT allergy concepts as an entry parameter for clinical decision support due to the multiple advantages that this terminology offers in terms of interoperability and information retrieval from electronic health records. The aim of this case study is to present the maps developed between Vidal and SNOMED CT allergy concepts, particularly for Spain. So now moving on to the project development, I will first present the reference sets that we have used in this project, and then I will focus on the maps that we developed. In this slide, you can see on the left the representation of the Vidal allergy reference set, and which consists of two types of concepts. First, Vidal substances, which refer to the specific agent causing the allergic reaction, and then what we call allergy classes, which are terms that group multiple substances. This allergy reference set is built upon Vidal terminology, and it includes only drug allergies. The food allergies fall out of the scope of this reference set. Even though this reference set is common for all Vidal group, for this particular project we have filtered the substances by their market status, so that we could work with a smaller list of substances. And therefore, when we refer to substances, we will actually be referring to substances that are part of one of the products that is marketed in Spain right now. And then the SNOMED CT allergy reference set that we used includes both concepts from the international edition and the extension for Spain. So now focusing on the maps that we developed, before starting the project, our objective was to have all Vidal allergy reference set mapped to SNOMED CT allergy concepts, and that implied two types of mapping the substances to allergy concepts, and then mapping what we call the allergy classes to allergy concepts. So first we focused on the mapping of Vidal substances to SNOMED CT substances or organisms. The inclusion of organisms was necessary for products such as vaccines and phytotherapy and other products. And then once we had this mapping done, we would focus on the relationship between Vidal substances and SNOMED CT allergy concepts. In this case, the map would be inferred through the causative agent relationship of SNOMED CT findings. So the causative agent is an attribute which is which is can be applied to clinical findings such as allergies, and its ranges are substances, organisms, and their descendants, and other SNOMED CT concepts. So it could be used for our purpose. And then the third type of mapping that we developed was the mapping between the Vidal allergy classes and the SNOMED CT allergy concepts. The main characteristics of the first and the third map that we developed are the ones that are displayed here. First, they are both manually maintained right now, even though in the case of substance to substance map, it was initially made with a tool called Cliniter, but it required a thorough review, and so now it's maintained only manually. The objective in both cases is to reach a one-to-one cardinality, and both maps are updated monthly on the side of Vidal concept. So they are updated monthly, just like our database. And on the side of SNOMED CT concepts, they are updated every 6 months, following the update of SNOMED CT extension for Spain. Here we have some mapping difficulties that we encountered during the mapping process. So some of them were related to one-to-many cardinality instead of one-to-one cardinality that we were looking for. Then we also had to face the problem or the lack of consistency in some cases with the different degrees of hydration, because for some particular cases, it was possible to make a specific or a precise mapping. But in other cases, such as the one that is shown here, the codeine phosphate and anhydra, it could not be mapped because there was no substance in SNOMED CT with this degree of hydration, or in this case, with no. And then we also had to face some problems with different granularity, since especially for the allergy classes to SNOMED CT allergy concepts mapping, since in some cases there is an allergy class for the specific substance, and that could be in general easily mapped, but then there's a more general class that groups these substances, that was not always able to be mapped to SNOMED CT. And then last, we had to face some problems also with the different languages and the different synonyms in each language. For example, in the case of this concept that is shown on the right, the factor 8 was only specified in one of the English synonyms and not in the Spanish one. So we had to look up at the description at the browser and to see if it was a term that we were looking for. Now I will present the results of the mapping. For the first map, the Vidal substance to SNOMED CT substance or organism, the mapping rates were significantly higher than for the third map that we developed, the Vidal allergy class to SNOMED CT allergy. In both cases, they are higher than 70%, but we see that in the first case, we reached 91% of substances mapped to SNOMED CT when we applied another filter, which was, instead of only focusing on substances which are present in products that are currently marketed in Spain, we also consider products that are not only market, but also financed by the public health system, so that when doing this, we wanted to focus on substances that were more relevant, were clinically more relevant, and not taking count for example, the homeopathy. And that's why we reached higher mapping rates. And then we also see that the cardinality, the 1-to-1 cardinality, was reached in most of the mapping done, but it was high. The 1-to-many cardinality was higher in the case of the Vidal allergy class to SNOMED CT allergy map. And for the second mapping, the Vidal substance to SNOMED CT allergy, at the moment of this presentation, we're still working on this query, on this relationship, and we are developing the query to obtain the relation between these two concepts through the causative agent attribute. So as I said before, we realized that the homeopathic substances were making the mapping rates lower than what we expected. So we are implementing a homeopathic substance flag to identify the homeopathic substances that fall out of the scope of SNOMED CT, and therefore remove them from the list of substances to be mapped to SNOMED CT. Then we also have to continue. Well, we also continue sending content requests to both the National Release Center for Spain, which is the Ministry of Health in the case of our country, and to SNOMED International, in order to get a full mapping coverage. So here in the left, you can see an example of a new content request that we made to the National Release Center for Spain. It's an allergy request, and we added the descriptions, the relationships, and the case significance and definition status of the concept that we were requesting. And we are still doing these requests whenever there are new concepts that are not found on the SNOMED CT reference. And considering the Vidal allergy classes, we want to say that we realize that it is preferable to specify the substance causing the allergy, and there is a trend right now that goes towards this direction, but on the clinical practice, it's not always possible to register the specific agent, and that's why we still develop this map, because it's not always possible to specify, for example, the type of antibiotic that provoked an allergy, even though this would be much better to specify it, for example, in the case of antibiotics to fight against antibiotic resistance, but on the practice, it's not always possible. And to end up with the presentation, looking forward, we will keep the existing maps updated. We will look forward to get a full mapping coverage and get a 1-to-1 cardinality. We will therefore continue sending the National Release Center for Spain and SNOMED International content requests to walk towards this direction, and we will extend the maps to other countries, which this is an ongoing project already. And in this case, we have to consider the different national extensions that are used in each country, and therefore the different content creation requests that we may have to work with. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anna, for that excellent presentation of your work. Can I please ask that attendees just give us a moment while we switch over from our pre-recorded content so that Anna Paredes can answer the questions that you've been submitting live. We'll see you in just a moment. Thanks. All right. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you. Hi, Anna. I'm
Hi.
going to check the Q&A box to see if we have any questions posted. I'm currently not seeing any. So, but I did have a question for you, Anna. So it does sound like you are planning on any sort of additional mappings or additional content requests. You will be creating those at the NRC extension level. Are there plans to also include to send those off to the international, SNOMED International for inclusion at the international edition?
Actually, we just between the recording of this presentation and right now, we made this. We were thinking about this issue, and we made the request, or yeah, we sent the request to SNOMED International, and we also sent some questions that we had, and they are considering it because they are considering the best solution because the problem that we're facing is that when we focus on our work in Spain, it's quite clear that it should be included in the national, by the National Release Center for Spain. But we're also working with countries in Latin America, and with other countries, and especially in America. And in this case, we wonder who should, if it should be directly maybe SNOMED International or maybe the National Release Center for Spain, and then promoting it to SNOMED International. The best solution to include this information, because we want to extend, as I said at the end of the presentation, we want to extend the maps to other countries. And yes, this is the questions that we are facing now. So we still don't know the answer to. Yes, we will, of course, and ask or consult the two organizations, but we don't know the best solution for this case yet.
That's great, because that actually answers my second question was going to be with regards to work with other primarily Spanish countries. As the CSRM representative for the Americas, I know that many of my Latin American, my South American countries are continuously looking for ways to collaborate with other Spanish-speaking members, and so that's great to hear that you've begun to reach out to some of them and work
Yes.
on some of this. That is great.
Yes, we have attended a couple or more, sessions that have been organized by SNOMED CT Argentina, and they were really interesting. So yes, we are really in touch with the rest of SNOMED CT in Latin America countries.
Great. I do see a question in the Q&A from Colin McFarland. Have you found a replacement for the CliniTerm tool?
Not so far. So we're that's the reason why we're doing it manually, because we used CliniTerm at the beginning, and it especially for substances, it worked when the name was exactly the same. But we had to review it really carefully, because there were some cases that, for example, albumin was mapped to albumin, which has nothing to do, and which it's a useful tool, but you have to be aware of its capacity. And so we used it for the beginning when we had to map a lot of substances. But right now that most of the the mapping is done whenever it's possible. So the Vidal substances that are not mapped right now are because they do not exist in SNOMED CT. So right now we only maintain it with manually. If a new active ingredient is becomes market in Spain, for example, we just review it and map it because it's usually maybe 10 molecules a month or something like that. So it's not such a big task as it was at the beginning.
Okay, that's good to hear. Let me check and see if there are any additional questions. So in addition to working with Latin American countries and obviously, further enhancing your current mapping and everything, what else do you have planned for this particular work? What's kind of your next steps?
We are currently trying to solve the second mapping that I explained, because the query that we're using, we realized that once we used the first query that the National Research Center for Spain told us that would be useful for this case, we realized that the SNOMED CT allergy concept specify as the causative attribute only the active ingredient, itself, not the salts or the esters or other ways of formulating the same active ingredient. So we think that we could get a broader mapping coverage with this second map if we find a solution for considering not only the active principle itself, but also all of its different formulations. So this is what we're focusing on right now in this project, and also on all the requests that need to be made in the future. Maintain the maps. It's already a big project, and yes, that's pretty much it. And yes, and SNOMED CT Argentina. The extending the map to Argentina and to Uruguay and Chile it's also in the scope of what we want to do.
That's great to hear because, everyone loves to, start a new project, especially new mapping. And the maintenance is what everyone tends to, put on the back burner. So it's really good to hear that, that is, currently ongoing and being planned for, because, that is some of the hard parts of the effort. Yeah. We have another question from Diana. Have you done an official proposal for including homeopathic terms?
Actually, yes, we have done it, and we requested it to. We asked the question to SNOMED International, and they said that they will consider it. They will have some meetings and consider the inclusion of homeopathic substances in the category of substances in SNOMED CT. But we don't know yet when they will be included, or I don't know, all the documentation that might be needed, because sometimes not as clear as other substances. So with the dilutions and these particularities of SNOMED substances, so they are considering it, but it's not solved yet.
Okay. I'm sure she's asking because I know that every couple of years someone inquires about it, and from the international side, we want to make sure that it's something that all members are requesting for. So it'll be interesting to see if following this presentation, if we have another couple more members coming forward with that. So thank you, Diana, for that question. Let's see if there are any further questions in this. What kind of advice would you give, Anna, to others who are wanting to embark on this type of work? What type of advice would you give to them?
First, I think it has to be as clear as possible the use that you have to that the use that the mapping will have, because it depends. Yes, the type of mapping, the cardinality depends on that. And even though you might have thought that it's going to be used for one purpose, and then you end up, in clinical practice, maybe you end up considering another purpose and maybe changing the map in the future. I don't know, but I think that is important. And also, from my experience, to really review the mapping. Maybe not all, but yes, it has to be reviewed by with a clinical consideration, or because maybe sometimes there are synonyms that have nothing to do, and maybe they are not included as a synonym yet in SNOMED CT, and despite all of this, it can be mapped to SNOMED CT because it's a synonym, and you search for documentation, and it's a correct mapping. But yes, you have to really, especially for plants. I think we spend more time with phytotherapy because common names of plants are very different depending on the country, and even in Spanish they change a lot from one country to another. So we really had to make sure that the plant that we wanted to map was the one expressed by that smart city concept. So yes, my advice would be to really pay attention to the mapping because it's not always as, sometimes more things can be mapped than you initially thought. And the name that is not the same, the description, but it's still a correct mapping. Yes.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. Yeah, that's one thing that, again, we usually really advise people is that you need to have that use case so that all of your mappings can be derived for that use case, and then making sure to then create your mapping rules and mapping conventions and everything based on that particular use case. And of course, the clinical quality assurance, as you say. So yeah, I think that that is all very sound advice.
And for example, considering the degree of hydration, we first thought that we could map. We first considered to map the substances, no matter. If it specified that it was an anhydrous or not. If it didn't specify anything, we would map the anhydrous substance to it. But then we started seeing that there were some concepts that in the SNOMED CT that specified the degree of hydration, and so we ended up only mapping considering that our mapping rules was to only map the substances that had the exact degree of hydration, even though it implied mapping maybe less substances and having to request them to the organization. But that was also a tricky question for us.
Yeah. Looks like we have one more question before we wrap things up. Natalia asked, what do you do about the mappings which are not one-to-one if you expect such a mapping? Pick the most matching option and reject the other. So what do you do?
No, currently there are not a lot of cases, and currently the tool that we are using for mapping is, we made it available to have more than one SNOMED CT code so that we could review later. We have an option of reviewing only the cases when the map is not one-to-one, so that we map, if we think it's a correct mapping, we map it, and then later we review it, and maybe we see that there's a more correct term, and in that case we delete the one that is less correct. But if both terms are correct, we map them to both of them. This happened mostly in cases where the same concept was both in the international edition and the national extension for Spain, and sometimes it was present it existed with two names, and we already sent these cases to the National British Center for Spain. So, or SNOMED City or SNOMED International. So it was mostly errors, I think, but we don't choose.
All right, great. Thank you. Well, we'll wrap up this session. Anna, thank you so much for that excellent presentation. Attendees, thank you for joining, and you can continue to send Anna questions via the AirTouch device. Thank you, everyone.
you.